case you haven't looked anywhere yet today, it is August 18th, 2022. Summer 22 is fading away. And as summer begins to fade away, so do the beautiful flowers. I've noticed in our yard recently that the hot weather and all that has been happening this summer is serving to make the flowers just a touch less bright than they have been. And over the weeks to come, they will fade even more. An article by Tim Challies that was written several years ago that was re-released recently reminded me that God has created this world in such a way that there is some kind of flower that is blooming in almost every kind of condition that we can imagine. We're never too far away from a big display of God's glory through some blooming plant or flower. And just as God makes flowers bloom in every climate, He suits Christians to bloom in all circumstances as well. No matter what it is that unfolds around us, and no matter what is done to us, God intends that we would bloom for Him, to display the true love that He has shown us, to show His gentleness to the world, and to be people of integrity, and to be people of a high degree of character. Well, as you think of the different places that flowers bloom, I wanted to think first of a botanical garden. I was reminded this summer that there are different kinds of gardens. The English garden is intended to look as if there was really no overarching plan and that this was just some beautiful act of God, even though human beings are behind it trying to put plants in certain locations. Whereas a French garden is well manicured with straight lines, and there's no doubt that men are behind it. Well, as we think about a beautiful garden, we think about how we can bloom in good times around us. I think of Sunday morning gatherings of God's people, or perhaps small group gatherings that we have together. When all is well, we ought to be blooming, displaying God's goodness, His glory, His mercy, His grace. But I've also spent a fair amount of time in the desert, and I've been amazed by the beauty of desert flowers. It seems out in the desert that these plants have been abandoned and that there's no real hope for them to ever flourish. But they do flourish. And we, like flowers in the desert, ought to flourish even when our souls feel dry, even when we feel that we don't have all the sustenance that we need. We continue to serve, to worship, and bloom. There are also flowers on the mountaintop, and here in Colorado, we are aware of the beauty of mountain flowers. And it seems at times that the winds and the drastic temperature changes on the mountains would be too harsh for any flower to bloom, and yet we climb to the top of mountains and we see these beautiful flowers in all of their glory. As we think about our lives, there are times in which it seems that life is too harsh, that survival is just not possible. And yet, God calls us to bloom in that situation of harshness and difficulty. And then there are flowers on the edge of a landfill. I've always been amazed when I have gone to a dump site to see there along the side some wildflowers blooming even in a dump alongside garbage. We bloom for God even when we are surrounded by the muck and the mire and the garbage of the world. A flower can remain bright right next to a dump site. God's people, even when surrounded by a landfill of circumstances can bloom as well. And then Challies writes about flowers on the edge of a volcano. We too can bloom amidst the heat of the most fiery trials, with eruptions of perhaps persecution or people exploiting us, hot lava flowing all around us. We can bloom even in those fiery circumstances. God has created flowers for jungles, for forests, mountaintops, wetlands, the plains, the deserts, the edge of the volcano, even alongside landfills. Everywhere, flowers declare the glory of God. God has saved us, his people. And in the circumstances and in the situations that we find ourselves, we too are to be blooming and showing his glory. I think of Galatians 5:22 and 23, and I think that these points of the fruits of the Spirit are points of blooming in the human life as we walk with Jesus Christ. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. What great points of blooming for the follower of Jesus Christ. No matter what unfolds around us, no matter what is done to us, we are able to bloom for him.